Good morning. I'm Dr. Petra, and welcome to the Science of Mind class here at CSLDallas. And I hope you have had your coffee. And if not, you should probably go get coffee, because we are going to have one of the more challenging conversations this morning. We always have to confront the conversation about good and evil. Good and evil. So we've been talking about how this whole creative process works, how the nature of reality is actually unfolding, what it does in terms of working through us, as us, and we're finishing up that mental work is definite, right? And that when we are using the law and or the universal principles definitely, that means in a deliberate, conscious manner, then we are participating in this co-creative process. And that it only works by working through us, right? So it's shaped, I guess, would be a way of thinking about it. It's shaped by the internal consciousness that we ourselves have. Not dissimilar to putting a piece of blue stained glass in front of a regular light versus a red piece of stained glass, right? The glass itself is what's shaping the light, but the light in and of itself is what it is. So now we come to this very last paragraph on page 45, but someone will ask, can we bring out both good and evil from the one source? And the answer is, of course not. The first principle is goodness, and only insofar as our thought and action tend toward a constructive program will it eventually succeed. Well, this is one of the few places that, we can go to the top. We cannot fight the universe. It refuses to be budged from its course. We can only go with it. But there is ample latitude for personal expression. Okay, so we're going to get to that part. But the first part here is this answer, of course not, which I think is it's one of the places I don't 100% agree with Ernest Holmes. So, because clearly people are using the creative process to create things that are harmful to other people, harmful to the planet, harmful to themselves. We have war, we have racism, we have discrimination, we have the rape and pillage of our planet, we have the discrimination against women. I mean, the list is, it's kind of endless, right? And people, there are hit and run accidents. People will hit somebody, have an accident, and they'll run away as opposed to take responsibility for it. So can we bring out both good and evil from the one source? Of course not. I think that the thing that helps us understand what Ernest Holmes is saying here is, will it eventually succeed? And so if we go back to our stained glass window analogy, right, you could put an opaque piece of glass over the light and it would appear as though the light had turned off. It would appear as though you had somehow damaged the light, destroyed the light, kept the light from shining. But the reality of it is the light, nothing has actually been done to the light. The light continues to shine. And the moment that that opaque piece of glass is exchanged for something else, the light automatically, magically reappears. The challenge here is, I think, there's a lot of them. The first is the whole challenge of the words good and evil. And we get the words good and evil from the religious context. And it usually implies that there is a force for good and a force for evil. And that force for evil is named in lots of different ways. And in many cases, it is also ascribed to the human soul, to the human psyche, because we're not the pure light. We're not the one in its totality being expressed. And so we get all kinds of religious explanations of what's good and what's evil. And we're immediately confronted with how many of those explanations are cultural. They're set from certain time periods. They're in certain cultural frameworks. And then they get carried over, and they get carried on over and over and over again. Good and bad are words no less fraught with judgment and pejorative viewpoint. But this does not mean that we can't have a discerning thought process about what's going on. We can discern that something is destructive, harmful, or something is not. We can actually discern the difference between these two. This is what Ernest Holmes goes on at the top of the next page. How then are we to know what is right and what is wrong? We are not going to know, we already do know. Everyone knows right from wrong in its broadest sense. And so what is that broad sense? Well, if the infinite source is the source of all life, then life is always moving toward life, toward greater expression, towards a more fuller expression of itself. This is the thing that cannot be changed. This is the thing that cannot be damaged, it cannot be taken away. Just like when you put that opaque piece of glass in front of the light, you haven't done anything to the light. You've just hindered its expression. You've caused it not to be able to be run as and through wherever that blockage is being held in place. And so will it eventually succeed destructive choices, harmful choices? Well, ultimately no, because ultimately so much harm and destruction is done that the whole thing either collapses or blows up, right? Because life is always for life, and it's always seeking to what shall we say, break down the barrier, move through the blockage, right? Move it out of the way so that the light can continue to shine. So this is a challenging piece, I think, of the science of mind, because there's no moral thou shalts and thou shalt nots. There is an ethical recognition that we should use the principles in a way that harms no one. But that statement in and of itself implies that one can, in fact, use the principles to harm others. And so this is why I don't fully agree with this statement. Someone will ask, can we bring out both good and evil from the one source? Of course not. Well, I think actually we can, because the one source in its form as the universal principle is a principle. You can use the principle of heat to heat your home or burn it down. So it can have a good outcome or an evil outcome, a bad outcome, a destructive outcome. And that's where we begin to recognize that we are the ones through which it's operating, right? I think that we want so much to just let spirit show up and do its thing, but we forget that it can only do for us, individually or collectively, what it does through us. And so our ability to make poor choices shows up as quote unquote bad, destructive, or quite frankly, acts that I have no trouble calling evil. Does that mean people are evil? No. But the behavior is out of ignorance and a false understanding of how life actually flourishes. And so this is the other piece of it, right? If I think I have to get my good, then I have to take it from you. Because if you have more good than me, I have a problem. So now I'm going to invade your country, or I'm going to steal from you, or I'm going to try to make all the money in the world, and I'm not going to care whether you make any, or all the different ways we can look at that. Because we forget that life is working towards life, and that will eventually succeed. So the other way of thinking about this is that the universe is never seeking evil. There's no force for evil. Even volcanoes and tornadoes and hurricanes and, right? This is just life with all of its complexity. And out of each one of these things, something new emerges. And life, well, quite frankly, it regrows, it resurrects itself, it finds a way of moving through in a whole new way. So eventually, life will always be for life. The question is, how is it moving through us? And this is this place of being able to it's next page over. To be able to recognize that it is our focusing or choosing that is making the difference. Here is latitude enough for the most expectant and the most enthusiastic to express freedom, right? To express freedom, which also means one must have the freedom to choose poorly. Because if one doesn't have the freedom to choose poorly, one would never learn what it means to make a good choice. And humanity is playing that out in living color over and over and over again, hopefully educating our choices. So this problem of good and evil is one that we constantly have to confront. And we have to seek a way of understanding. So, as I said, I hope you have your coffee. I hope you've had your coffee. You have your coffee in your hand. And let's see, what do you struggle with about this? And how do you come to terms with it as you explore your own spirituality and the science of mind? How do you come to grips with it for yourself? And perhaps in your struggle and or your answering, we help each other in finding a way to hold it. So we're going to turn and say good morning to Ryan and to Richard, and say good morning to all of you online and all of you here in the room, and see what is going on. Good morning, Ryan.
Well, good morning to you, Dr. Petra, and good morning to everybody here in the room. And for all those online joining us all over the world, I've seen people checking in from Mexico, and we have Charlotte, Wichita Falls. So it's nice to see everybody. And I hope those online and those in the room didn't notice my cool graphic effects that I was doing earlier. That's called this thing that's connected to my computer that's feeding in the audio and the video. Well, it fell out. And so you didn't see anything for a second. But we regained composure, we're back on board, and everybody's here with us. So I just want to acknowledge that in the room. So this is an engaging discussion, and we do encourage everybody to participate. And the way that we do that here in the room is just simply raise your hand. And myself or the iconic Richard will help get a microphone, and we encourage volunteerism. So you can also hand the microphone to your fellow friend. And welcome to those who are online here with us, all the folks who are joining us in the Zoom room, and all the people that are online looking at us on Facebook Live. Welcome, and you can participate too, and it's as simple as hitting the raise your hand icon if you're in the Zoom room, and that way we can call you into the room. Or for both Zoom and Facebook, feel free to leave your questions and comments in the chat. and I can go ahead and bring them into the room. Now, I do have a shameless plug that I have to plug here. I was given specific instructions from our Reverend Patty to plug our new home study groups, which is important for all of those online and here in the room. They're smaller groups that are going to go along on a discussion, a journey. And so I encourage everybody here in the room, check out our information that we have here on our placards about it. And for those online, I'll post the host sign-ups, because we are looking for hosts right now, inside of the chat, and that way you guys can sign up as a host. And then next week, you can sign up to be a part of the group itself. So it's a really good experience. So with that being said...
Wait, before you go on, Ryan, let's also acknowledge that we have our first international host in the UK. And so she's going to be positioning her home study group at a time that works really well if you're in a European time zone, European or African time zone. So watch for that as well. We're really excited. So when you can sign up as a member, you can sign up for that group. It'll also have a time zone that works in the US as well, but it's primarily focused on making sure that we have something available for our folks in those other time zones. So that's very exciting.
It is, isn't it? We have grown to internationally known.
I love it.
It's wonderful. All right.
Mexico, too. Mexico, Bob and Chloe.
Hint, hint. Wink, wink. So back to the subject at hand. I just want to poll here in the room before we check in online. Would anybody like to ask a question or has a comment?
Did everybody have, oh, right here, Darlene. Everybody have enough coffee? You need to go get some coffee? Ooh, I know. It's a big subject. It's a big topic.
My name's Darlene. I'm so glad that you pointed out, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong or right, since this is a right or wrong
right?
conversation, about spirit doesn't just show up and do its thing in our life. And I think one of the challenges for me that I've been becoming aware of is how I use the law.
Yes.
That it is in everything, bringing it more practical in how we use. When I say what I want and this is good, and then I just expect spirit to flow it into my life without looking at how am I actually taking part and being active and cause.
Yes.
And so this is a good conversation that, yes, I do believe that we can use the law to bring about dark, bad, but take responsibility that I caused it. Kind of.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the good news, bad news, right? I co-create my own reality. So I can create the reality of my dreams. Oh, wait, I co-create my own reality. I think I co-created what I'm currently experiencing, right? And that level of responsibility is really empowering and can also be really challenging, right? And to take responsibility for that, and then to recognize that just saying, oh, I want my life to be happy and I want to be spiritually fed, so I'm going to do some spiritual work, and then I'm just going to let spirit bring it about, right? We could then spend the next 20 hours that day complaining about people, complaining about how hard life is, complaining about this, complaining about that, pointing fingers, doing whatever, right? And we're actually giving entirely different instructions to the universal principle than our moment of spiritual awareness where we're choosing to bring love into our life, right? And that's what we don't realize, is that we're constantly choosing by what we're focusing on, paying attention to, talking about. And it is our privilege, really. It's our privilege to get to pay attention to that and decide. And so, it's always so funny to me when somebody gets fired from a job that I've listened to them complain about for the last year. I hate this job, I hate this job, I hate this job, I hate this job. And then they are stunned when they're either fired or let go of, or, you know what I mean? It's like, but that's the manifestation. That's actually the manifestation of not wanting to be someplace. That is actually the universe responding to us. And of course, if we have had a lot of trauma in our life, if we have had a lot of bad modeling, if we have had a lot of fear or a lot of abuse, right? We have a very faulty way of thinking about how one actually gets their good, how one actually is loved, and so we do all kinds of destructive things. Not because we ourselves are inherently evil, but because, quite frankly, we don't know any better. And the first place of all of that is taking responsibility, right? Taking responsibility for the mess we've made and for the things that we actually want to bring into experience. And this is true individually, it's true collectively. Yeah, thanks, Darlene. All right, right over here we have a comment. I'm happy to see you. Yay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Shauna.
So I'm struggling. And I know bad things happen to good people. And I struggle with this notion that that person caused it. And my current struggle is an 8-year-old friend who has a very rare form of cancer that started at 2. And there's no way I believe that she caused that. And she dealt with so many surgeries between 2 and 4. And because of the whole medical system, she has to go every 6 months for a scan. And every 6 months, you know, we have to see nothing. But the process is they look every 6 months. And it's been 4 years and she's been cancer-free. And this time they found something again and she's in surgery. And, you know, all the people who love her around her are seeing it as nothing. But she had to go through surgery and had 3 spots removed. And we're seeing that as, you know, it's going to be nothing. And the biopsy will say nothing. But this is where I sometimes struggle with this teaching, is that there's no, I cannot believe that her behavior manifested this thing in her life.
Yeah, it's a great question, Shauna, and it is it is where we start having to, we have to have a more nuanced, deeply, we have to have a more universal perspective about choices and co-creation, right? So Thomas Troward has this wonderful thing, he calls it the law of averages. And he says, when we spiritually do our work, we raise ourselves out of the law of averages. Children don't really have that luxury, right? And so we are all biologically, we all have a biological imperative, and we are all part of the physical biology of Gaia, right? Of this organism called the Earth. And we have collectively as humanity, especially in first world countries, we have decided that there is a certain way of engaging with Gaia, which is actually toxic. And that toxicity has consequences. And people are constantly being in experiencing the outpicturing of humanity's choice to co-create a toxic environment. And so the challenge then is, can we as individuals, on the one hand, raise ourselves out of the law of averages, which is to really move out of the recognition that biology is not, what do we want to say, is not the only imperative. That there is actually a spiritual imperative that can be brought to bear. And it is the spiritual imperative that raises us above the law of averages. Is that always easy? No, because there is a cultural belief in cancer. There's a medical establishment that makes enormous amounts of money out of cancer. There is an expectation that cancer will be found. If it's been found once, it'll be found again. And so there's, so it's not just a child, nor is it just a family, nor is it just family and friends, right? But these are the things that really, I mean, all of those causes are all intertwined. And it's, so that's one answer is that all of those causes are being adjudicated against each other, right? And so the principal can only manage to outpicture that complex tapestry of causes. Then we have the opportunity to recognize that in so many ways, everything that's happening is everybody's opportunity for spiritual awareness.
That part,
right?
That part is obvious to me.
Right.
But it's the innocence of this child. I'm sorry. It's that part is obvious, Mm-hmm. And at the global level, I guess, the same thing as I watched 20,000 people die in Turkey,
right,
and Syria. It's like
right.
It's these moments where I struggle with that notion of personal accountability.
Well, yes, right, of course, because we have collective accountability. But we are each engaged in that, in adding to collective accountability. So what is our collective accountability? How do we participate in that collective accountability? And are we crushed by the continued examples of it not being well handled? Or are we inspired to continue to do the work to shift it? Right? Does that make it any easier? No, of course not. It doesn't make it any easier. Does it make it hurt any less as a human being? No. But that's the other piece of it, right? This work is always from the spiritual causal level. It will not change the fact that it hurts. It will not change the fact that it's hard. It will not change the fact that people will die. Children will die. People will die. It will not change those things. But when we have a spiritual perspective, because the other side of that coin is, as challenging as it may be, this little girl, what she's experiencing is her soul's journey. And this lifetime is a nanosecond in her eternity. Some people would argue, how do you know she didn't come in to have this experience to help others learn lessons of growth and love, unconditional love? Right? And so in eternity, this child's soul and heart and presence is undamaged. And can we really find that place to stand? Because that's what allows us to see someone as whole. Can we see someone as whole to the best of our ability? So, and it's not necessarily easy to move into the spiritual point of view when our heart is heavy and it hurts. Yeah, I'm sorry, Shauna. I know it's really, right? Children should never die before their parents. Children should never have these kind of illnesses. And somewhere along the line, we have to move into the mystery of life. Yeah. We'll let you just settle yourself, okay? Yeah, Ryan.
Yes, I wanted to pull in Connie and have you join the conversation. Connie, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Reverend Petra.
Hi, Connie.
Hi. I have a dear, dear friend who complains all the time. Just rant. She has no idea that she is creating the things she's complaining about. And, you know, I've told her as lightly as I can without being teachy-preachy to her, you know, about it, but it's a habit. And she
Yeah, thanks, Connie. Right, and that's, of course, the difference between children and adults, right? Adults are growing into their awareness of what they're doing. The challenge is always with children, there's only so much that they have efficacy that they have to grow into. And then they're subject to the people around them. And then that's our job for our children, is to see them whole, see the best for them, see that humanity is growing and awakening, and to continue to claim and declare the greatest truth that we can have for them. So my son, when he was born, he just about died in the first 5 days of his life. Then he had, probably over the course of his first 8-10 years, he had 7 or 8 major, significant developmental challenges. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying, and shed tears, and so angry and so uncertain. And all I knew to do was to hold on to the fact that his life was in the hands of life, and that life will grow. No matter what, life will grow. And that's all I knew to hold on to. And to keep listening to what was being presented to me as I could do this or not do this, or I was given some super bad advice by a nutritionist, which caused him to be a failure to thrive baby for almost a year, which meant that for a year he neither gained a single ounce nor grew a single centimeter. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. Because I was given faulty information, and all I knew to do was to bring my spiritual truth to bear. This child's life will grow. This child's life must grow. And this child's life, the eternal life that he is, it must flourish, period. End of sentence. Nothing else was acceptable. And that's what we have to hang on to, right? That's the spiritual causal work. To blame a child for their experiences is nonsense. And it's also why I'm not afraid to call acts evil. There are such a thing as evil acts. Now, there are probably a minuscule number of evil acts compared to the number of things that other people want to call evil. Dancing is evil, this is evil, that is. I had a woman tell me that eat pork was an evil meat. And I was like, okay, I grew up on pork. I'm German. We eat a lot of pork. What do you mean it's an evil meat? Right? So there's a lot of that is, in fact, judgment and cultural and, all the historical ideas of what's unclean and what's acceptable and all of that nonsense, right? So there's a whole host of it that is, in fact, perception and judgment. No question about it. But then you get to other things, the Holocaust, racial discrimination, shooting black men in the street. I mean, I don't have no problem calling that an evil act. Do I think those people are evil? No. Ignorant, in the worst possible way. Afraid? Absolutely. Trying to control everything? You bet. Trying to keep things from changing? Yes, in the worst possible way. Not knowing any better. And today, we don't always know any better than what the medical establishment tells us, and they're just not always right. So when you're looking for something, this is where with a child, right? If a whole boatload of people are looking for something, those people who are not looking for it, we just have to hold that more strongly. Trained thought is more powerful than untrained thought. And we have to be unshakable, unmovable in this is nothing. I don't care if your medical training tells you to look for it. Your looking for it cannot outweigh my spiritual belief that life is for life in this child, period. End of sentence. Nothing that you do or say will move me from this belief and realization that the life of this child is for life. And I'm not going to look for what's bad. I'm going to look for what's good. I'm going to look for all the ways that life is actually expressing through this child. I'll never forget somebody who said she had a serious issue with one of the organs in her body. And everybody wanted to always talk about that organ, that organ, that organ, that organ. Do this, do this, do this, do that. Oh my God, 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 right? And she said, wait, 98% of my body is healthy and well. That's 2% of my body that's not. I am going to focus on the 98%. And that's what she did, and then healed herself of what was going on. It's all in what we focus on, but we're constantly engaged. And this is where we want to not be simplistic about this you create your own reality, because inevitably the question is, well, what about those people who aren't creating the same reality that I'm creating? Well, that's why we have the mess we're in, right? Because we have different expectations, different viewpoints, different ways of creating our own reality, and they're all meshing together. It's not just a single line linear, especially when we're engaged with other people in, you know, whether it's at work or medicine or government or whatever it is, right? Even in a company, everybody's bringing their point of view to the table, and everybody is participating in co-creation, which is why our spiritual work is so important. We're not saying this is a no thing because our humanity is hurt and afraid and hopes it's a no thing. We're saying it's a no thing because there's nothing in spirit holding it in place. There's nothing in the universal law of life that holds ignorance and illness and destruction in place. Those are all an outpicturing of our belief that that is possible, and that that is an acceptable way of being, and that it's inevitable. Poverty is inevitable, cancer is inevitable, people's, you know, having accidents, there's, you know, and that's what statistics are. So many people will die of this, so many people will be in an accident of that, so many people, right? And so we buy into it. That's called the law of averages. Our spiritual work is to raise ourselves above the law of averages. That's what it means to individuate the co-creative process. Not just to be generically creating, but to individuate that creative process at and for and about the things that we want to raise out of the law of statistics. And say, especially when the law of statistics is creating havoc. Right? It's one thing. It is inevitable that it will eventually succeed. Life in its totality will eventually succeed. And we just look at the last 200 years. Despite everything else, if we do not manage to destroy ourselves through climate change, everything else has in fact improved. Every measure that you can use on the planet, everything has improved. The thing that has not, that's gotten worse, is the climate. And that is now having all these effects, plastic and toxicity and global warming and all of those kinds of things. But life will eventually succeed, which is when we're in alignment with life, we can actually say spirit is moving. But we have to be in alignment with the recognition that life is always for life. Nothing can stand in the way of that. Then we are raising ourselves and everything above the law of averages into the stream of life, which is for life, right? The statistics are only the outpicturing of the human experience and our human ignorance that we believe that the facts of the physical universe are causal. It's not the facts of the physical universe that are causal. It's that trajectory of life and our ability to get in alignment with life. There's nothing in the infinite that's holding cancer in place. It's our belief that cancer exists. And all of the concomitant medical whole thing that has grown up around that. And then ultimately it gets activated by our fear. Right? Our fear that it's not going to work, right? People today have PTSD over climate change. Why? Because we've bought into the fear of it all. And so we have to stand in that place that says we raise ourselves out of that. We believe in life is moving toward life, and it is in fact awakening humanity to our responsibility to it, to make changes, to make a difference, to choose differently, and therefore co-create something differently. Do you see? And so personal responsibility is not shame or blame or, oh, why did you create that cold? How did you create that horrible experience? It's not that at all. It's deciding to move in the direction of life and to cling to that with every ounce of our being. And to be unshakable in that. And I mean, I've done that with people right up until the day they died. Was that a failure? I have no idea. But what I know is that being continues. I know that for beyond the shadow of a doubt. And so whatever is going on, I'm going to participate in it with the boldest, most powerful statement of spirituality that I have. Because I want to raise ourselves individually and collectively up out of the fear and the ignorance and the human constructs that tell us how life is, right? And this is the work. And when we're able to do that, the more and more we're able to do that, the more and more that those universal principles can flow through us as us and make miracles. Right? And yeah, and it's hard. And again, it's not to deny the fact that we're sad or that we're afraid or that we have feelings about it. But the feelings, we can't allow the feelings to run us because they are based on that human experience. That's the constant spiritual work, right? Doesn't mean we deny the feelings or suppress them or shouldn't have them. That is not the point. That's just creating more toxicity. No, we have the feeling, we have the feelings, they're perfectly legitimate because it's around people we love and care about. And then we stake our claim in the spiritual truth. And we trust that life is for life. There's nothing in spirit that is holding these destructive things in place other than that it's an outpicturing of consciousness, right? That's the only thing holding it in place, which is why there is no force for evil. Nobody said this child has to die, or this child has to have surgery, or this child has to have cancer, or this child, right? Nobody said that.
Thank you, you're amazing.
These are the things we have to find our way through. Thanks, Shauna, right? And we should not.
But it helps to do it with something.
Yes, and we should not look for the easy answer, right? It's not a simplistic. This is grown-up spirituality, you guys, and it means that we recognize the deep complexity and paradox of ourselves as spiritual beings having human experiences. The spiritual reality is real. The human reality is real. They're real. And it's only a question of where are we going to be causal from. The last thing I'll say, which also is really brought up with this, is I don't find it useful to ask, how did this happen? How did this child, did this child create this experience? Who created this? I don't find that useful. Why is it happening? I also don't find useful. Because in the infinite scheme of the universe, I have no idea. Other than somehow it's an outpicturing of consciousness. The question for me is always, what's my part? What's mine to do now? And mine to do now is to hold the spiritual truth, period. And that's right? What now? That's the useful question. What now? All right, I told you you needed coffee for this morning. We have a fabulous guest soloist, an artist this morning. Rob Holbert will be singing and playing a saxophone for our celebration this morning, so do join us. We have a guest speaker and a fabulous musician next week and the week after, although I'll be on the platform. So lots and lots of good, exciting things going on. So we look forward to seeing you online, here in the room, and wherever we see you. Bye for now.
All right, enjoy.